6 years ago, I created what would become my most watched and most popular video series, and I gave 10 reasons why I believe that Linux is better than Windows and why I made the switch. Is it all a bunch of propaganda, or is it still true today? I think now is the time to add a little fuel to the fire. You are watching Revision Part 1. Linux does what Win don't, and that begins right now on Spatry's Cup of Linux. Before I begin, I would like to take a moment to thank all of the viewers who support cupoflinux.com through their financial contributions. This revision is just for you. Before coming to Linux, I was considered to be a Windows power user in terms of my expertise with desktop publishing and multimedia software. I have used Microsoft products since the DOS days, and I switched to Linux as my daily driver just before release of Windows 8. Prior to the turn of the millennium, I got my first taste of Linux, but did not stick with it because it was unable to provide the functionality that I required. A lot has changed in 20 years. Linux has proven to be relevant in this area. Don't believe me? The evidence is quite convincing if we count all types of electronic devices worldwide: home computers, web servers, mainframes, supercomputers, mobile phones, smart TVs, appliances, GPS, Kindles, and even automobile operating systems. Linux is the most widely used kernel worldwide. Fact. More people are using the Linux kernel today than there are people actually running Windows. Even Microsoft knows that Linux is better. They are using Linux to power their Azure cloud computing services, and they even added a GNU subsystem to Microsoft Windows Professional Edition for developers. While Linux has not taken the home desktop by storm, it has proven itself everywhere else, and personally, I hope it stays that way. Because as desktop Linux rises in popularity, there may be a chance we could see more viruses, worms, and other forms of malware entering our ecosystem. Some say security through obscurity? Who cares? Linux is proven to be safe to use. Let's face it, using Windows without a real-time antivirus scanner bloating down your system resources is much like driving without brakes, just an accident waiting to happen. Linux is more secure by design. When a new virus or Trojan or other form of malware is discovered, it immediately makes headline news on internet news services and blogs, like calling the fire brigade. The community gets on top of those security holes and issues fixes as quickly as possible, usually within a few days, sometimes within hours. Windows, on the other hand, still has bugs which have not been fixed for years. Some of them, I would be willing to bet my life savings that they have no intention of fixing. As Linus Torvalds, the father of Linux, once stated, "When there are enough eyeballs on the code, all bugs are shallow." This still applies today. 6 years ago, I mentioned that the Wikipedia listed 47 known Trojans, viruses, rootkits, worms, and malware for Linux. I'm sad to report that that number has grown to 64. Compare that to the millions and millions of viruses for Windows. Which type of system stands a better chance of getting borked? Now, I'm not not saying that Linux is impervious to such threats. No computer is 100% safe from malware, but odds are very rare of Linux machines getting viruses. Many Linux users do not feel the urge to use a real-time virus scanner. Why waste computer resources when you don't have to? Okay, let's move on to drivers and hardware. Did you ever try booting a live Linux medium and discover that it powers everything on your computer without having to install a single driver? The OS is not even installed, and yet you can use the internet, listen to music, play games, and more. That is the power of the Linux kernel. Unfortunately, it doesn't power everything. The kernel developers have a hefty job of writing these drivers because there is a vast amount of hardware they need to provide support for. But suffice it to say that Linux supports more hardware out of the box than a Windows system does. Due to the rising popularity of Linux, more hardware manufacturers are contributing code to the Linux kernel developers, and that means better support for more hardware. I'm still blown away by the things Linux can do. And that leads us to our next entry on stability. What can I say? As a power user, I tend to beat up on my machines. My last Windows computer could beat me at chess, but it was no match for me at kickboxing. It failed the flight test when it flew across the room, and it failed the landing test when it hit the wall. Stability has always been a major issue for me when using Windows. Every edition of Windows I've ever used had some kind of problem. Blue screens of death would pop up suddenly and unexpectedly, usually whenever I was in the middle of something important. Linux is stable by comparison. My Debian server, which runs public simulations, only gets rebooted twice a year after running updates. It is rock solid and trouble-free. ScreenFetch this morning stated that its uptime is 67 days, 18 hours, 21 minutes, and 37 seconds. It keeps running and running and running. Unfortunately, that level of stability is impossible on Windows 10. Forced upgrades alone negate the possibility of running a home server for weeks on end. My main computer runs Arch Linux, and like Timex, it takes a licking and keeps on ticking. In the rare occasion of a rogue program crash, it is nothing for me to drop into a TTY, kill the process, and jump back on the desktop to complete the task at hand. I've never had the same level of stability with any version of Windows I've ever owned. Now, in all fairness, Linux has its shortcomings too. Because of its rapid development, there are bugs and regressions that one can encounter. The difference is that you can fix them. If the file manager breaks, you can replace it. As a matter of fact, because Linux is modular, you can literally replace any piece of software which interacts with your hardware. Some distributions allow you to swap out your kernel, change your entire desktop, or have multiple desktop options at the same time. You are not locked down to the Microsoft way of thinking. You are free. That's right, you are free as in freedom. Not necessarily free as in cost. You are free to change the code and modify it. You can make copies of the software and give it to your friends legally. As a power user, I have done that very thing myself. I have my own Linux distribution called mcol, which is based on Manjaro. What makes my distribution different is that it has a syslinux bootloader for legacy machines which are unable to boot official Manjaro live media. Try to make your own spin of Windows and give that away free, and you are breaking the law. Remember, illegal is a sick bird. Now, some may argue that Microsoft is now a big contributor of open source code and has even given hundreds of thousands of copies of Windows 10 free of charge. Pay very close attention. Microsoft fits in the same category as other big companies like Amazon, Apple, Big Pharma, Google, Monsanto, and Walmart. Their bottom line is the almighty dollar, and the price of that free Windows 10 you were forced to upgrade to is way too high. Children, don't take candy from strangers, and don't take freebies from big evil companies with their eye on your wallet. If you would like a better explanation, please see my video in this playlist titled, Windows Does What Linux Won't. Come to think of it, one of my biggest complaints about Windows 10 was updates. Who should your computer obey? I don't know about you, but I want my computer to follow my instructions. Isn't that what computers were designed for? On a Windows machine, you may be able to delay an update from happening, but the clock is ticking. You are going to get updates whether you want them or not. Some Windows 10 updates have been reported to wipe user data and cause other problems which affect usability. I cannot stress this enough, kids. Backup, backup, backup. It is better to have it and not need it than to need it and not have it. Linux, on the other hand, manages updates on your system in a sane way. Your package manager issues all updates for all software and dependencies on your computer. There is no need to reboot either unless you updated your kernel or graphics drivers. The point I'm driving at is you decide when or if an update occurs on your Linux system. You will not be nagged to upgrade, and it will never halt your system to run those upgrades arbitrarily. Linux obeys you, not Microsoft. Now that I've mentioned the package manager, why don't we spend a little bit of time on the software center? Linux gets you what you need from a central location known as a repository, using a piece of software called the package manager. Almost any kind of software you could possibly need or want is stored here and is usually free. When done correctly, this can be a powerful tool which provides convenience for end users who do not have the time to search the internet for applications. If the software center does not have what you want, most Linux distributions give you the ability to add additional repositories. Or you can use what I like to call self-contained software like snaps or flatpaks. This allows you to have limitless software options. When the first edition of my Linux Does videos came out, Microsoft did not have package management. But today, they have a form of it, and in my humble opinion, it is done the wrong way. It is a tool to subjugate some of their users, all in the name of security. It installs applications on your machine you didn't even ask for. And it has an ad engine to entice you to make purchases. Monetizing the desktop is a surefire way to annoy people. Windows 10s users can only install software from the Windows Store. Say goodbye to any program which does not have Microsoft's seal of approval. Throw away that software you purchased from your favorite tech shop and forget about your software collection you have stored over the past few years, because the only way you can install those programs is to pay an additional fee for a professional license. The difference between Linux with a paid support model and Windows 10 for free is that Linux with the paid support model costs less. And now we get to move on to desktops. Windows users get to share the same ugly desktop across the board. To be honest, I preferred the look of Windows 7 over the Windows 10 offering. You can probably use StarDock, if it's in the Windows Store, to change the desktop appearance, but you are still stuck with the same user experience everyone else has. Linux, on the other hand, has several desktop options. You can have a Windows-like user experience, or you can make your own. There is no limit to how many types of desktops you can have installed on the family computer. Each user can have their own graphical user interface, and most of them will have a lighter footprint than the Windows desktop. For that matter, you can have multiple desktops running at the same time and multiple users logged in the same machine too. Wow! And next, we can move on to performance. Let's face it, Windows has a terrible shelf life. If you install and uninstall software on a regular basis, be prepared for fragmentation. Windows file system is inferior in how it writes data to the hard disk, and that can slow your computer down. Try looking for a disk defragmenter in the Linux Software Center. There isn't one. We do not have to defragment our hard drives. Our file systems place data on the disk in a logical way. It does not write to the first available free space like Windows does. I have a household computer which has a dual-core machine with only 4 gigs of RAM and a standard mechanical hard drive. It has been running Manjaro for the past 4 years. That machine runs just as fast today as the day I installed the operating system. It runs for weeks on end without being restarted unless it's updated. As a matter of fact, that machine shipped with Vista when it was new. I doubt it would even be capable of running Windows 10 effectively today, but why would I? Linux is better. Now, some may say that the question of speed is moot, considering the existence of solid-state drives these days. For some, SSDs can be quite cost-prohibitive. I see articles surfacing all the time with people complaining about Windows 10 slowing down even on SSDs. A DuckDuckGo search reveals all. And of course, that brings us to our next topic on legacy hardware. Linux allows you to combat planned obsolescence. That Vista machine I just mentioned runs Linux well, and while it is certainly not a race winner, that machine is used daily to surf the internet, read email, news, and watch streaming video. Linux allows you to dust off that old hardware you deem ready for the landfill and lets you breathe new life into that equipment. I recently came across a user who had a forced upgrade to Windows 10 on their netbook. The machine took 5 minutes to boot to the desktop and 8 minutes until it was barely usable. And then, when you went to open a web browser, it would cause the unit to freeze. I installed Ubuntu on that machine, and now that computer is used to surf the web and any other tasks the owner wants, and they are pleased with it. Thank you, Microsoft. Windows 8 and Windows 10 are the best things to ever happen to Linux. And finally, we can move to compatibility. And wow, all I can say is this. A lot has happened in the past 6 years in this area. I use Wine every day to run software which simply will not even run on Windows 10. And this is software that I simply can't part with. What can I say? I hate what Adobe did to a Macromedia Studio. I paid a lot of money for that original Studio 8, and I still want to use it today. As a matter of fact, I used it to make these graphics that you see on the screen here. Okay, and moreover, I have a library of reliable Windows applications and games I will never need to get rid of thanks to Linux. Valve has made awesome contributions to the Wine project. Steam's Proton empowers users to enjoy their game library on Linux. That's right, Linux is awesome for gaming. And because you have a lighter footprint on Linux, you can expect additional resources to be free for gaming and applications. Your mileage may vary depending on configuration, but my own personal experience has been nothing short of exemplary. Now, Wine or Proton will not run everything. But hey, at least Microsoft has been generous enough to provide virtual appliances of Windows 7, 8, and 10. Hurry up and download them before they see this video and decide to pull them offline. Now you can have disposable copies of Windows that you can use in a virtual machine for those pesky game modding tools that you just can't get running in Linux. So, with all that ground I covered, it is clear that the perfect choice for me is Linux. I prefer Arch Linux for its speed, modularity, stability, and the magnificent documentation on the Arch Wiki. One weekend with Arch taught me more about computing than 10 years of daily Windows use. I suggest Manjaro for beginners. They get the power of Arch Linux with the added tools to make it user-friendly. I have said this in my original video, and I will continue to say this. You will never hear me say, don't use Windows, or any other OS for that matter. I am a firm believer that you should use whatever helps you to get the job done. Today, I cannot imagine a world without Linux. It does everything I need and allows me to achieve my goals in a way that I think, not the way Microsoft thinks. And since I've decided to revisit this topic after several years, it is only fair that I revision the other episodes which follow this one, so you can expect to see more types of these videos to come very, very soon. If you are new to Linux and want to learn more, feel free to visit cupoflinux.com. We have a friendly community which will help you to ease your transition to Linux. You can get help with common questions, and we can help you find resolution to problems if you should encounter them. It is a great way to share your passion for Linux and to make new friends along the way. In closing, I will simply state that a little bit of love goes a long way. Please take a small amount of your time and be excellent with somebody today. Until next time, peace out.